everything they intended. So it's a lot more work, but in the end, I think the final product is what I would want done with something I created someplace else. It's a true recreation of what was originally done.
Now, back to Voltron. If I'm not mistaken, because I actually saw this on the DVD, but I could be wrong, wasn't the 5-line footage something that you just, they just happened to get, they were actually grabbing onto another footage, I think it was the robots, and then they switched focus because that was a better...
Well, there were originally 3 series, and obviously I didn't work on Voltron, but there were originally 3 series, and the whole thing was back in the 80s and the late 70s. The only way you were going to get something on TV was by stripping in a syndication, and they needed to get something long enough, so they took a couple of different series. And I think their original choices were Go Lion, Die Ruger 15, and Albegus. And they never actually released any Albegus, although there was a toy of Albegus released as Voltron 2.
Yeah, the 3 gladiators.
Right. Because the Lion segments caught everyone's attention. Die Ruger 15 just had too many characters and too many vehicles. It just, it was... In Japan, it was considered to be too much. 15 different vehicles with, I think, there were like 30 pilots or something insane like that.
No, those 15 pilots, but a bunch of supporting
all the supporting characters, right? Yeah. So it was just too much. So the Go Lion, they actually went back and made additional Go Lion episodes in Japan, specifically as new Voltron episodes. But I mean, the Voltron storyline is very, very loose. There's all this stuff, which now that it's being released by Media Blasters, of course, you can now go back and say, hey, they were eating those guys,
What I like is that because of you having the dub and you had the right, phrasing and the right look, did you actually see the characters in the in the outfits? But then the crisis happens and they get one off to put the costumes on. I understand how. The reason why, because you had to cut and paste and everything else.
Oh, I didn't do that.
I know you did, but in the genre back then. Now, is it much easier to do now that there isn't, because the people are dubbing easily? My question.
Keep the continuity.
Yeah, how's the continuity?
No, it's no easier. The only thing, the thing is now is the tendency is not to do that, to not do a Voltron or a Battle of the Planets, where they actually create new animation to change Battle of the Planets, which was the first Gatchaman. Of course, we did the most recent reiteration of Gatchaman, which was the first accurate dub.
What they did was that Eagle Force?
Well, the first Gatchaman was Battle of the Planets.
Yeah.
The second one was G-Force. The third one was Eagle Riders. Then we did Gatchaman, the actual original version.
And you dubbed that one in English?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I haven't seen
the whole series.
I can't wait to see
with Alex Ross covers. I can't believe you haven't seen it. It's beautiful, beautiful packaging. But what they did on that original is, well, space is hot right now. Let's cut out all the space shots and let's make it look like it's an outer space series. It all actually took place on Earth. And they created 2 entirely new characters, 7 Zark 7 and 1 Rover 1, which they shot a bunch of new animation, actually about 7 minutes of new animation, I should say, that was recycled over and over again, to bridge all the spots where they would throw the boomerang and someone's head would fly off and that kind of stuff.
Yeah, they had to cut out the violence.
So, but it was, they presented the whole thing as, it was an outer space. No, it was all on Earth. But they had this one shot of the Phoenix in space, and they would always cut to that, on the planet, blah, 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 But, that's how things were done back then, is you wanted to stretch that media out, so you just started building. And sometimes it worked. Speed Racer is very, very loose, but it's a fantastic show. And I think so many people in this country remember Speed Racer with such fondness, and it's not that popular in Japan. It's remembered, but it's not a big thing there. Whereas over here, it's like, oh yeah, Speed Racer, yeah, we remember that one. So.
I was wondering, how difficult was it to start up ADV Films when you first were going, and what were the difficulties? And did you see yourself here today, like where you're at, back then?
Never saw where we are at right now. When we started ADV, I've been trying to get somebody in the U.S. interested in distributing anime uncut for about 7 or 8 years at that point. I talked with a bunch of local production companies in Houston, and I was running I was working originally at NASA, and then I went into private sales selling electronics to NASA. But I was working with a store that also had a retail operation, and we were selling laser discs, and I basically said, well, let's bring in these Japanese laser discs. And I was showing them at a club I was running, and someone said, hey, you ought to meet this other guy who's trying to do the same thing on the other side of town. And that was John Ledford, the co-founder of ADV, and we finally got together, started talking. Literally 15 days later, we had a company up and running, and we'd licensed our first title. But we were able to do it then because everyone thought we were nuts. The Japanese, literally, when we first called Toho, they were like, we don't own this. What are you talking about? I said, yes, you do own this. Here's your catalog number in Japan, and blah, blah, blah. And they called the Japan. Oh, we do own that. You really want to buy that?
Was that the Devil Hunter?
That was Devil Hunter Yoko.
Yeah.
Because
I love that one.
there was no concept with the Japanese that these original video animations that were so short had any real value outside of Japan. They'd never been able to sell them anyplace except in Japan and Asia. So at the time, the trick was actually getting the companies to take us seriously. But on the flip side, there really wasn't much competition. We were blazing new ground. Now, of course, anime is this huge industry, and everyone knows about it. And when you go on a major title, quite often you'll be bidding against major studios, and so the dollar price on shows has gone way through the roof. But at the time when we started, said, if we're doing really well, one of these days, maybe we'll be releasing a title every month. And within the third year, we were releasing 3 to 4 titles a month. So it grew much, much faster than we expected. And to be where we are now, publishing New Type USA, to have our own network, which is in like 50 million homes, it's just, no. Who would have thought that? You can't think.
So this is basically like a dream come true for you.
It's a dream come true. It was one of those things that we just, it's crazy. It'll probably fail. We'll probably lose our shirts, but we'll always wonder what would have happened if we didn't do it. Yeah. So we did it. And
now you can buy a bunch of new shirts.
I can buy a bunch of new shirts, right. Or have them made, like this one, or my Ava jacket I'm wearing.
That's nice.
What does ADV stand for?
ADV, what it stands for is a classified secret, because the reason for the name is real simple. When we first started dealing with the Japanese, we were literally in a closet of another business, and we're using their phone lines. And when we started calling the Japanese companies, we realized we can't use their name. We need to come up with a different name. But we hadn't really thought out. When someone actually asked, well, what is the name of your company? John literally ad-libbed the name based on things that were in the office, or the closet, as it were. And so we don't tell people what it actually stands for because it's kind of silly. It does not. The most fascinating story I've ever heard is that a lot of people are thinking, well, it's in Bubblegum Crisis, because in Bubblegum Crisis episode 7, it actually starts off in Houston, and there's actually a point in the show where the words AD Vision are actually written on the screen, because there's one of the main characters in that show is Vision. In that episode, there's a rock singer in that Vision concert, and there's a bunch of the AD police guys there, and there's an AD person standing there next to a sign that says, "We love Vision." It actually says AD Vision, and that's the one episode that's set in Houston. So it's very odd, but not intentional at all. It just kind of happens.
That's crazy.
There's a weird karma to this business, and everything comes around and comes around. You keep meeting the same people over and over again. An experience I like to talk about is that when we were buying Gamera 3, I was at the premiere in Tokyo, and afterwards we left the studio and went to a little cafe, and within 30 minutes, 3 different people we knew from different parts of the world walked past that cafe, completely unrelated to Gamera, no idea why they walked past. It was like, well, there goes. And it's a much smaller world. You start to feel like the Truman Show is really real, that there's this select set of people that's cycling around, but everybody in this industry turns out to know everybody else, going way back before the industry started. So.
Mm-hmm. Do you have a question in there, or do you want
Hey.
do you want
No, I'm good.
Okay, you were talking about expansion and how your company's been expanding to different areas. I spoke to you yesterday during your panel about gaming, and we spoke about that. But in terms of live action, the rumor with the Neon Genesis Galleon film, is that kind of like the direction you're thinking of taking ADV?
Well, that's just one thing. I mean, the whole live action Neon Genesis film is something that was kind of a logical growth. It's a huge property that's made over $2 billion worldwide. The motion picture industry is looking for franchises. Ava was something that was a very obvious thing to look at in adapting to a live action film. It's not a rumor, we're working on it right now. We've got production people working on, obviously, what it did, production designs. It's going to happen. The only question is it going to happen this year, next year, or the year after that?